Hello and welcome to my session, Best Practices Deploying Microsoft 365 Apps. My name is Martin Notnagel. I'm a Microsoft 365 Apps Ranger at Microsoft. That's a field team which is working with strategic customers on their deployment management and update strategy for the Office desktop applications. Based on the experience from these engagements, we would like to share some best practices with you when it comes to deploying the Microsoft 365 apps. So we would like to start with talking about a common approach we see and some of the common challenges which are associated with this. Maybe you recognize some of the challenges and it can help you to improve your approach to deploying the apps, whether you're currently planning to deploy them, you're in the middle of the deployment, or maybe it's post-deployment and you can just tweak things here and there. And then we will the majority of the time we will look into the actual improvements. So how can we bring down, for example, the package size? How can we reduce the user downtime? And finally, how can we reduce the number of packages that you have to manage in your environment? And managing always means there's maintenance effort associated. So we would like to bring this down as well. And all these three aspects at the end will also save you a lot of network bandwidth. So we will touch on this as well. So let's start with looking at the common approach. What do we often see, what organizations are doing, and what are the typical challenges? So you as an IT admin, when it comes to an Office upgrade, so you want to get rid of the legacy version of Office and install the new Microsoft 365 apps, there are a lot of tasks to do. So of course there's the uninstall, reinstall aspect of the Office product itself. But maybe it's not only Office. Most organizations have Visio project deployed somewhere to a few users, but not all. So it's not only exchanging the old Office desktop applications with the new ones, but also the old project Visio applications with the new ones. But not for all, so you have to target these. And then most organizations are not supporting just one language. Maybe your organization is supporting 2 or 5 or 10 languages. We've seen engagements where organizations are supporting up to 30 different languages. And the upgrade itself is a one-time activity. But after you have done this, so you uninstalled the legacy version of Office everywhere, deployed the new versions, over time people might have a need for adding project, adding Visio to their device, or additional language packs, or additional improving tools. So these are the tasks at hand. So what we often see is that for each of these scenarios, install Office, install Visio, install project, install a language pack, there is this a dedicated deployment package which is built, often using the Office install wizard, which is part of the Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, or the Office customization tool, which you can access when you go to config.office.com. And these wizards are great tools. They lead you through the process. You can select your product, you select your servicing channel, for example, semi-annual enterprise channel or monthly enterprise channel. You can select your architecture, 32, 64-bit, and you can select all the languages you want to support. So maybe you tick 24 boxes, and then it's basically next, and you end up with a deployment package which is exactly doing what you have specified. But in order to address these different scenarios, you have to repeat this process. So one package for Office, one for Project, one for Visio. If you have, for example, 32 and 64-bit in your environment, you're repeating this process dedicated for 32-bit packages and 64-bit packages. So when you have done this, you will end up with an implementation which we sometimes call the classic implementation. So basically there's one package for one purpose. So everything is on-prem. You're using your config manager infrastructure, for example, to facilitate the first install. We call the first install the moment when you uninstall the old Office, install the new one. So based on the install wizard, you have one deployment package which is installing Office. It's uninstalling the legacy version of Office, so that's fine. This package contains the setup engine, the setup.exe or the Office deployment toolkit, a configuration file which is telling the setup what to do, and then of course the source files for Office itself as well as for all 24 languages. the way config manager works, it's synchronizing this full package to a device first, and then the install runs. The install uninstalls the old version of Office, installs the new version of Office, and then maybe 1 or 2 languages. Often we see that devices only need 1 or 2 languages out of these 24. The issue here is this package is pretty large. So it's an 8 GB package because we have all these languages in there. And then we only have Office on this box. So for what we call second install scenarios, where you want to add something to an existing Microsoft 365 apps installation, you need additional packages. For example, to install Project. But maybe you're supporting 2 different servicing channels. So you have 2 different packages, one installing Project Semi-Annual Enterprise Channel, one Project Monthly Enterprise Channel. The same goes for Visio. You have not 1 package, 2 packages, addressing these specific scenarios. And imagine you have 32 and 64-bit mixed, then you would have 4 project packages, one for Monthly Enterprise Channel, 32, 64-bit, so one for 32, one for 64, and then for Semi-Annual Enterprise Channel, one for 32, one for 64. The same goes for Visio. The same goes for every language, like English, German, Danish, whatever you support. So, and because each of these packages contains the full set of source files, each package is 8 gig in size. So imagine you have a device which needs Office Visio Project. You're pushing 3 packages to this. So it means a downtime, or you use a downtime 3 times, because the setup runs 3 times. So the user can't do anything while we're installing the product. And it means we push 8 GB 3 times because we have 3 different packages. So that's some of the challenges that we see. You have a lot of packages. They're pretty big, so that's why they are heavy on the network. When we push a lot of packages to the user, there's an extended user downtime. And because all these packages contain source files, they get outdated pretty quickly. Every 4 weeks, Microsoft is releasing updated sources, including security fixes, bug fixes, new features, and so on and so on. So after 4 weeks, all these packages in your infrastructure are outdated. So that's the set of challenges that we often see. So let's have a look at how can we improve the implementation. How can we resolve these challenges? So first of all, we would like to bring down the size of the packages. 8 GB is pretty big. So you're using a cloud product. Why can't we offload at least some of the content distribution to the Office CDN? So your config manager is still in control, but why not offloading content to the Office CDN to reduce the package size? Why do we have to run the setup 3 times when we want to install Office Visio Project? Why can't we install this in one pass? Why can't the setup automatically understand which products does a user need and install what is required? If we can implement this, we can reduce the user downtime. And then, as mentioned before, we have packages which are specific to a certain scenario. So I will show you how we can build, we call it universal packages. So you have one package which can install project regardless of what is the state of the machine. Is it whatever servicing channel it is, whatever architecture it is? If you want to install project, there's one package to install project. And all these improvements, so single pass install, reduced number of packages, smaller packages, of course is already saving a lot of network bandwidth. But there are still additional ways like delivery optimization and connected cache, how we can bring down the network bandwidth consumption. So these 3 steps to reduce the package size, reduce the user downtime, and reduce the number of packages. We will look into these individual steps now. So let's go and implement something. So let's start with reducing the package size. In order to reduce the package size, we have to understand what is actually in the package. What we typically see after we've investigated what's actually in the package, do we need all the content there, is that we can bring down the package size by 50%. So maybe the mileage varies in your environment, but that's what we typically see. And bringing down the package size by 50% also means we are saving a lot of network bandwidth. So let's look at the structure of a deployment package. The deployment package usually consists out of 4 components, which are the setup engine and the configuration file. These are pretty small. They are in total like 5 megabytes. Then we have the source file for the common set of files in Office. So you will see this on the slide deck as highlighted. That's the xnone file. You see that's a pretty big file, nearly 2 gig in size, which contains all the common components of Office, all the individual applications, and is neutral when it comes to languages. So this file we need every time we install Office for the first time or want to add something. So we need this file. But then you have all the language-specific files. You see this in the screenshot. They have like en-us, fr-fr. So all the language codes you can see. And imagine your organization is supporting 24 different languages. Then these add up pretty quickly because the individual file is about 250 to 350 meg in size based on the actual language. So that is where the majority of volume in a deployment package is consumed. So we have to look at the languages. When I talk to IT departments, they often can pretty quickly define how many languages do they support. Is it like 10 languages, 20 languages, 30 languages? But it is worth not only looking at how many languages do I support, but also how often is each of these languages installed currently. Even in my legacy world, how often is each language pack installed? So what we usually do is we query the config manager inventory database and export the data into a spreadsheet, like you can see on the screen. And then we start to play around with the numbers a bit. So you can see on the top, I have 2 language packs, Dutch and French, which in total are installed 10,000 times. Overall, we only have roughly 30,000 language pack installs. So these 2 languages are already representing 30%, more than 30% of all my installs. So that's something I have to keep in mind. But on the other hand, if I look at the bottom of the list, there's, for example, Swedish. That's only installed 3 times. So 3 times means if I include the Swedish language pack in my deployment package, it's, as I mentioned, between 250 and 350 meg in size. The config manager will synchronize this language pack to almost 30,000 devices, but only 3 will utilize the synchronized language pack because only 3 need this. So is it really a good idea to include Swedish in my deployment package and synchronize it to basically all my devices when only a very small fraction needs it? So this is how I can usually draw a line and kind of start adding up the number of installs and look for where's my 90% threshold. So which set of language packs is representing 90% of my installations? And on the screen you can see where the line is. So the top 8 language packs, which are 1.6 gig in size roughly, are representing 92% of all of my installations. So in 92% of my installations, one of these language files is actually required during install. But the lower 16 language packs, which are 3 gigs in size, is needed in less than 10% of all the cases. But if it's part of my deployment package, I'm syncing these 3 gigabytes to each and every device that I have in my environment. But less than 10% needed. So the idea here is to offload the rarely used language packs to the Office CDN. So to enable the setup to still install these languages, but not make it part of my deployment package, but during install, if this language pack is required, it should be synchronized down from the Office CDN. And this is how my setup can then look like. I still have my Office upgrade package. There's still the setup, there's still the config file, it's still controlled by my config manager. I have still the source files for Office itself, but now I only include the source files for my most commonly used language packs. because this is good use of my on-prem network bandwidth. But I excluded all the language packs that I don't need so often and enable the client to download this on demand when needed. And that's typically a 200 megabyte download because the client only downloads what it needs out of the language pack. So not the complete language pack, but only the portions which are required. So if you're deploying the Microsoft 365 apps, but you're excluding, for example, Access and Publisher, the language portions for these two applications will not be downloaded. So in this example, instead of synchronizing a 300 megabyte Swedish file to 30,000 devices, I will have 3 devices downloading 200 megabyte each. And if you're using the Windows 10 built-in feature delivery optimization, which we highly recommend, and maybe also in conjunction with the config manager connected cache, the device will be able to share content with peers. So maybe this device don't even have to download the content from Office CDN. Maybe there's a peer in the same subnet or in the same boundary group which already has the required content, and then this traffic will happen on-prem. So that's a very good way to reduce the package size, offload content to the Office CDN, but with delivery optimization and connected cache, I can even reduce this data that I need to download from the internet. So how do you actually implement this? So first of all, you have to identify your most commonly used languages. I have an article online which has a full rundown of these steps, including a sample query, how to query the config manager database, what the spreadsheet should look like, and so on and so on. So please look at this documentation for a full rundown. So first step, identifying your most commonly used languages, as I have shown before. Then I usually use the Office install wizard in Config Manager or the Office customization tool on config.office.com to configure my deployment package and tick only the most commonly used languages. So then I end up with a deployment package with this set of source files, and then we have to update the configuration file, so the config XML. What we have to specify, and it's highlighted in yellow here on the slide, we have to add the keyword allow CDN fallback equals true. So this basically tells the setup, hey, if you want to install something on this machine, for example English and Swedish, and English is in your config manager cache available, but Swedish is missing, I allow you setup to fall back to the CDN for the Swedish language pack. So it can combine these two sources. If you're using the wizards, you will have a config file with the hard-coded list of languages. That's something we often don't want. So often we leave just one language in, which should be common on all devices. For example, US English, so that's installed on all devices. And then we update, remove the hard-coded other language codes and update one to ID match previous MSI. That's a nifty feature. If we use the remove MSI feature, which uninstalls the legacy version of Office for us, it can save the information which languages were installed before, and then take this information into account when determining which languages should be installed on this machine. So this is something we often use. You could also use MatchOS, that's linked on the slides later on. But most of the time, Match Previous MSI is doing a good job. And as I mentioned, typically we can bring down the package size by 50% by applying this improvement. So let's look at another improvement, which is on the one hand side, bringing down the user downtime. So the user will love you for this. But also, again, it saves network bandwidth. The idea is, hey, I've got a mix of the Microsoft 365 apps, Visio, and project in my environment. On every device, I might find any permutation, and maybe Visio Standard, Project Professional, Project Standard, Visio Professional, so complete mix. The goal for the IT admin is to upgrade this to the modern version of Office and keep this combination. So a like-for-like replacement. So what we have seen is that IT admins are employing scripts to do this. So they're basically querying the machine, then they're updating the config file on the fly, to inject the information, hey, on this machine I should install Visio, on this machine I should install Project, on this machine I should install both, and then it kicks off the setup. But scripts are often error prone and have to be kept up to date if something changes. So it works, but it's not a recommended way. Then sometimes the approach is pretty hard. It's just uninstalling everything, installing Office onto the box, and then the user is basically instructed, hey, if you're eligible to use Visio and Project as well, just call the help desk and ask for Visio Project. So the user has to call the help desk, hey, I'm eligible to use Visio. The help desk will assign the package to the user, and it will get installed at some point in time. That's working, but it's not a good user experience. And also we are pushing packages twice. We push the initial upgrade package and we push the Visio desktop application package. I've seen admins trying to take away this work from a user and do it in their own config manager environment by setting up different collections, which are including the various permutations of the product, and then pointing the right deployments to these collections, trying to get them into the right order. A lot of work, really a lot of micromanagement can be done, but it's not recommended. For quite some time, the Office deployment tool has a nice feature, which is called MSI condition, which most IT admins don't know about. So I want to show how this works. We can leverage MSI condition to make our config file more flexible. So this config file, when we look at it from top to bottom, you will see that's installing a 64-bit version of Office. The servicing channel is monthly enterprise. We are installing Microsoft 365 apps in any case because it's specified. But then when we look at the Visio portion, we see the product ID for the subscription version of Office is specified. So setup should install this. But we add a condition. We add the condition that only install the subscription version of Visio when previously the MSI version of Visio Standard Retail Media, Visio Professional, or Visio Professional Retail Media was on the box. And then the same repeats for Project. So the setup will install Project, but only if previously there was a matching MSI product installed. So that's a feature from Remove MSI. When Remove MSI is uninstalling the legacy versions, it saves the information which MSI products were on the box, and then the setup can just look up the conditions. Is there a match? If yes, I install the product specified. If not, I will not install the product. So that's one config XML, which is addressing all the 4 scenarios of any possible permutation of the Microsoft 365 apps, Visio, and Project. So and then finally, my third improvement is I would like to bring down the number of packages that you have to manage. Because going forward, if you have a large number of packages, that's a lot of maintenance effort. That's a lot of work that drags you down, and it's not fun to just update source files every 4 weeks. So let's look at the common implementation. What makes the deployment package specific to a scenario? That's mainly the source files. Whichever set of source files you're looking at, this set is Office-specific architecture, so you choose 64-bit. It's Office-specific servicing channel, like monthly enterprise channel or current channel, and it is Office-specific version in time. So the source files are actually making a deployment package specific to a certain scenario. Like this package can only be used to install 32-bit monthly enterprise channel, version XYZ. So the idea is to remove the source files from the package. So we have a universal project package. With small tweaks to the config XML, the package itself now becomes universal. So I can assign it to a device, and whatever Office is installed on this device, 32, 64-bit, whatever, whichever servicing channel, whichever version, that doesn't matter because this package will install project on this device and automatically adjust to the existing configuration. This is what we call a universal package. By removing the source files, we also have two additional benefits. One is, if there are no source files, there's nothing to update. So if I build a universal project package, which is just the setup and config file, so it's a pretty small package, like 5 meg in size, I don't have to update it every 4 weeks. Maybe I update it once per year to kind of update the Office deployment tool. And the other benefit is, instead of pushing the full set of source files with all these languages to a device, and then the setup just determines, oh, I only need this piece and this piece and this piece, and 99% of the synchronized content in my local cache I don't need, I allow the client to download from the Office CDN only what it needs. Because in Office, or the Office family, there's a big set of common files, common functionalities, which are used across all the different applications. So if I want to install a project on a device where the Microsoft 365 apps are already installed, these common files are already in place. So the setup only needs to download from the Office CDN what is required to add project to this mix. And that's actually a download of less than 50 megabyte. It's round in the ballpark of 30 megabyte. The more languages on a device, it's growing a bit. 64-bit is a bit bigger than 32-bit installed, so there are some variances. But usually adding project to an existing install, less than 50 megabyte download. Or Visio is around 100 megabyte. A bit more because we have all these templates and stances in there. So instead of pushing again an 8 gig package, we push a small 5 megabyte package and then the device is downloading maybe 50 megabyte. The following slide gives you an overview of some of the sizes. So for language packs, the download is somewhere between 100 and 250 megabyte based on the language. For proofing tools, it's somewhere between 5 megabyte and 100 megabyte, again, based on language. Adding Visio in 2 languages is about 200 megabyte. One language is around 100 megabyte project. If there are 2 languages already on the box and we are taking this forward, it's in my test was actually 23 megabyte. So how can you implement this universal package that you never have to touch again and which is auto-adapting to this situation? So first of all, we have to get rid of the source files. If you're looking at one of your existing deployment packages, you will see the setup file, the setup.exe file, your configuration file, and a folder called Office with some subfolders and files in it. This is where the source files are sitting. We can just delete the full folder. If this folder is missing, the setup will automatically understand, oh, there is no local cached copy that I can use, so I have to go to the Office CDN. So just get rid of Office and all the subfolders, and the source files are gone. The setup will automatically go to the CDN to acquire the source files. But then we also have to tweak the configuration XML because we want to make it generic. So we are deleting the reference to the Office Client Edition. So we are not hard coding that's a 32 or 64-bit install. If we don't specify it, setup will check what is already on the box and use this information. If it's a 32-bit install, it will perform a 32-bit install. If 64-bit is already installed, it will perform a 64-bit install. The same goes for the update channel. So remove the hard-coded channel, and then setup will look at the existing install and just carry forward this information. You might want to add the version equals match installed keyword, because we are using the Office CDN as a backend. So setup will reach out to the Office CDN and might see a newer version on the Office CDN. If you do not want to couple the installation of a product like Project or Visio or a language pack or a proofing tool with an automatic update to the latest version, we can specify version equals match installed. This basically instructs the setup, if you see a newer version on the Office CDN, ignore it. Match the version which is already on the device. And then finally, we have to specify the product we would like to install. And for the languages, we can again leverage the information what is already on the box. So we can specify language ID match installed. So dear setup, please match what is already on the box and use target product, use the existing Microsoft 365 apps installed as a reference. So setup will check which language is already installed, maybe again English and Swedish. So it will understand, okay, I have to install project in English and Swedish with the same architecture as already installed, with the same servicing channel, and I should not do an update if there is a newer version. I just match the version. So this way we can build a universal package which is not specific to a servicing channel and architecture, which is not doing an implicit update. There are no hard-coded languages and no source files. So build once, run forever, basically. So let's look at the summary. What have we achieved here? So the modern deployment implementation, with a few tweaks, we still are in full control through our on-prem infrastructure. Of course, you can use cloud management tools, but I know most organizations are not there yet. So we still have one deployment package for our first install, but instead of just installing the Office desktop application, it now also installs Project and Visio if required. And it is smaller because we removed the rarely used language packs. For second install scenarios, when we want to add something, we brought down the number of packages. So we now have one package for Project, one for Visio, and the same concept applies for the languages or the proofing tools. So one package for a language pack or one deployment package for a proofing tool. And they are much smaller in size because we don't have any source files. So we don't have to update these source files every 4 weeks. So I hope this gives you a lot of ideas and tips and tricks how you can improve your deployment. I would like to call out 2 additional things you should consider. The one is the new servicing channel that we have. So we have the new monthly enterprise channel. Most organizations historically tend to look at the semi-annual enterprise channel as their preferred channel, which is fine, but maybe only for business critical machines which need a high level of software stability. For more general purpose devices, we're recommending to look at the current channel or the monthly enterprise channel to adopt features quicker. And also, I was only talking about deployment. There's so much more, like how do you prepare, how do you assess your readiness, how do you perform the actual upgrade, and then how do you manage it going forward. And we have a lot of new capabilities in this space. So not only look at deployment, but also look at the preparation phase, look at the management phase, and look at the cloud-based tools that we have for this. So to kind of wrap up my session, I have included a lot of references, links, and pointers in the slide deck. We had a quick rundown of these 3 improvements. For each, you will find additional links, articles, and documentations online, which go really in depth to explain what each change is causing, doing, so you can fully understand the implications of these changes and maybe tailor it a bit for your environment. So, thank you for your time. Thanks for listening to me. I hope you learned a few new tips and tricks that you can utilize in your environment to make your life as an IT admin easier. We have a lot of more videos and presentations online, so please go to the Microsoft Ignite 2020 link and look for other presentations as well. Thank you for your time and have fun deploying.